Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Let's just say that what started as a temporary barista job to pay the bills turned into a 6-year journey. And now I'm running the place. Most days, I love it. The regulars become like family, and there's something satisfying about creating the perfect drink. But some days, well, let me tell you about what happened last night. I've seen it all in this job. I've had a self-proclaimed witch try to curse my entire bloodline because we ran out of oat milk. I've dodged a flying ceramic mug from an angry businessman who couldn't wait 2 extra minutes for his cappuccino. I've even dealt with drunk college students throwing up at our doorstep at 7 a.m. and then complaining about our lack of vegan options. But last night, that was something special. It was almost closing time, and for once, everything was going smoothly. You know those rare perfect shifts where you look around and just know you'll get out on time? That was this night. I'd already done the usual, we're closing in 5 minutes rounds, and headed to the office to start the closing paperwork. Company policy says we can't count the till until all customers are gone and doors are locked. Usually not a problem. That's when I heard the commotion. I walked out to find one of our regulars, let's call her Karen, emptying her entire purse and baby stroller contents onto a table. My coworker shot me a look that screamed, "Help." I walked over and asked if everything was all right. Karen explained that she couldn't find her AirPod and was certain she had it earlier. Since she'd been a regular customer for over a year and usually quite pleasant, I decided to help. We checked both tables she'd sat at, even dug through the sofa cushions. Note to self, never do that again without gloves. Nothing. I offered to take down her contact information so I could do another thorough search when opening tomorrow. That's when it happened. This normally reserved, polite woman transformed into something I can only describe as a banshee from hell. She started screaming about how expensive her AirPods were, claiming they cost £150 and refusing to leave until we found them. Her husband showed up shortly after. Poor guy deserves a medal or maybe a brain scan. Her husband tried to reason with her, suggesting they could come back and look tomorrow. In response, she threatened to call the police. They actually started wrestling over her phone while she tried to dial emergency services. He tried to reason with her, which was his first mistake. He called her crazy. Pro tip: never call an angry Karen crazy. The screaming that followed made my ears ring. I stood there, keys in one hand, phone in the other, texting my boss about the situation. My boss, being the absolute legend she is, called to check on us and heard the chaos firsthand. Karen then demanded we check the garbage bags. I told her she was welcome to check them herself in the dumpster out back. Wrong answer, apparently. Her husband gave up and left, then came back, then left again. Meanwhile, my coworker tried to finish mopping. When my coworker politely asked Karen to move so she could mop that area, Karen exploded, accusing my coworker of shouting at her. I stepped in to defend my coworker, pointing out that not only had she not shouted, but after Karen's behavior for the last 20 minutes, she was hardly in a position to judge anyone's tone. That's when she played her trump card. She started ranting about how we weren't showing her respect and claimed we were treating her differently because she wasn't from this country. Now here's the thing. I'm an immigrant myself. I might have the local accent, but my birth certificate says otherwise. I'm also not white. So when she tried to accuse us of racism, I told her exactly what I thought about her playing the race card and left to the office with the till, half expecting to return to find her chained to our front door in protest. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. Suddenly, Karen transformed again, this time into a delicate, tearful victim. The officers weren't buying it. They asked about her child's whereabouts, and she admitted the child was at home with her husband. When they questioned her further, it came out that she had been using the AirPods to play music for her child. The truth was finally revealed. This woman had given her expensive AirPods to her 4-year-old to play with, lost one, and then called the police on us. The officers scolded her about the inappropriate use of emergency services and warned her about potential fines. Karen started crying, but not the fake tears from earlier. Real embarrassed tears. My boss called the next morning to tell me she'd reviewed the security footage and was officially banning Karen from the premises. But wait, there's more. Apparently, Karen's husband came by early the next day to apologize and let us know he'd found the AirPod. It had been in their car the entire time. The following week, he came in alone for his usual coffee order and quietly mentioned they were now in marriage counseling. I gave him his drink on the house. I've always been fascinated by the art of manipulation. Not the sketchy kind, but the kind where you make objects dance in your hands. It started when I was scrolling through social media and came across videos of people doing incredible tricks with butterfly knives. The way they moved, the precision, the flow, it was mesmerizing. I knew right then that I wanted to learn. I spent weeks researching before making my first purchase. Safety was my top priority, so I started with trainer knives. They look exactly like real butterfly knives, but have no sharp edge. My collection grew slowly but steadily. My favorite is this beautiful trainer called the Craig Raken V2.5. It's perfectly balanced and great for practicing tricks. I practice everywhere I go. In my backyard, at the park, even while walking with friends. People usually just give curious looks, and sometimes they ask questions. I always explain that it's a trainer knife and completely safe. Most people find it pretty cool once they understand what it is. Last weekend, I was hanging out with my friends at the local park doing some basic tricks with my Craig Raken, when this kid, maybe 9 or 10 years old, came running up to us. He excitedly asked what I was holding and if he could try it out. I told him he could, but I'd need his parents' permission first. The kid immediately pointed out that his mom was nearby and ran off towards a woman sitting on a nearby bench, practically bouncing with excitement. A minute later, he came running back, calling out to his mom and pointing at me. He eagerly asked if I could show them some tricks. I agreed and started showing them some basic moves, like the thumb around. Nothing too flashy, just enough to demonstrate how it works. That's when his mother stormed over. She immediately started yelling at me to put the knife away, claiming I was going to hurt someone. I tried to explain that it wasn't actually a knife but a trainer with no sharp edge. I carefully demonstrated the dull edge to prove my point. She wouldn't listen and threatened to call the police if I didn't put it away. I told her to go ahead, pointing out that she'd be the one wasting their time. She pulled out her phone and actually called them. We all stood there waiting, me, my friends, the kid, who looked mortified, and the mother, who kept shooting me dirty looks while muttering about dangerous people these days. When the police officer arrived, the mother immediately started screeching about how I had threatened them with a knife and demanded my arrest. The kid quickly jumped in to defend me, explaining that I was just showing him cool tricks. The officer turned to me and asked if I had a knife. I explained about the butterfly knife trainer and offered to show him. He agreed but asked me to do it slowly. I carefully reached into my pocket and handed him the trainer, blade first so he could see it wasn't sharp. The officer examined it and stated he didn't see any problem, saying it was perfectly legal. When he started to hand me back my trainer, the mother suddenly lunged forward and snatched it from his hand. Before anyone could react, she slapped the officer across the face. The officer immediately ordered her to drop the knife and put her hands behind her back. She refused, yelling about how she was doing his job for him. Then she threw my trainer onto the concrete as hard as she could. The sound it made when it hit the ground made me wince. That was $300 trainer she just tried to destroy. Things happened pretty quickly after that. The officer called for backup while restraining the mother, who kept screaming about protecting her child and how we were all against her. When the second officer arrived, they arrested her for assault on an officer, filing a false police report, and destruction of property. The kid was crying by this point, so my friends and I stayed with him until his dad came to pick him up. The dad was super apologetic and offered to pay for any damage to my trainer. I refused. It had a few scratches but was still perfectly functional. A few days later, I got a call from the police station. They needed me to come in and sign some paperwork about pressing charges for the damage to my property. When I got there, I found out the mother was also being charged with child endangerment because this wasn't her first incident of making false police reports while with her kid. She lost custody to the dad who, as it turns out, had been trying to document her behavior for months. And by the way, my trainer knife still has those scratches. I've chosen to live out in rural West Virginia while most of my relatives stayed in New Jersey. After serving 8 years in the military, I wanted peace and quiet. I bought this beautiful property in the woods with my savings and veterans benefits, turned one of the rooms into a gaming den, and started hosting fellow gamers who wanted to meet up in real life. My aunt never approved of my lifestyle choices. She thought I was wasting my potential by not pursuing a real career in the city. But I was happy with my simple life, my online friends, and the occasional gatherings I hosted. The night everything went down, I had a gaming buddy from Texas staying over. We'd been planning this meetup for months to work on our guild strategies and just hang out in person for once. I was sleeping peacefully when my fence alarm went off at 2 a.m. Living in the woods, you never know if it's a bear or something worse. So I got dressed and grabbed my shotgun. Standard procedure out here. What I found instead was my aunt standing by my broken gate with bolt cutters in her hand. When I asked her what she was doing here, she broke down sobbing and screaming. Through her tears, she told me that the devil had taken her family and they had thrown her out. She demanded a place to stay. I told her to keep her voice down, reminding her it was 2 a.m. When I asked for clarification about being thrown out, she explained that her husband and children had voted against her in the election. She went on to say that when she tried to show them how wrong they were, they called the police on her. I questioned her about driving all the way from New Jersey to West Virginia in the middle of the night. She responded by demanding to stay in my guest room, insisting that family obligations trumped everything else. When I explained that I couldn't accommodate her because I had a friend staying in the guest room, she became even more agitated. She started ranting about how I was choosing some random internet person over my own aunt. I had to explain that my guest wasn't random at all, but an invited friend who had traveled from Texas to be here. That's when she pulled out her phone and called the police. I listened as she falsely claimed to them that I was keeping her out of her own home. When the first officer arrived, he started talking about a tenant dispute. I had to interrupt him and explain the situation clearly, that she didn't live here and never had. I told him this was my house and suggested he check her ID to confirm she actually lived in New Jersey. The officer left to verify this information and returned with 2 more cops. They tried to reason with me about letting her stay because she was too drunk to drive. That revelation shocked me. She had driven over 500 miles while intoxicated. I refused to let her stay but suggested the county jail probably had space. When they proposed letting her sleep in her car, I rejected that idea too, explaining that it would just lead to more problems in the morning and another police call. They ended up calling a tow truck for her car and taking her to the drunk tank. The next morning I found out she was being charged with destruction of property for my gate, driving under the influence, and making a false police report. Her husband and children refused to bail her out. She had to pay for an Uber all the way back to New Jersey because her car was impounded as evidence. I heard she's looking at some serious fines and mandatory counseling. I was in middle school when I witnessed one of the most satisfying cases of revenge I've ever seen. There was this kid in my class, small, skinny, and kinda nerdy. He had this fascinating habit of taking apart pens whenever he got his hands on them. It wasn't malicious, he just loved understanding how things worked. His mom was a single parent working 2 jobs, and his grandfather had practically raised him until passing away the previous year. The kid spent most of his free time in the school's science lab, helping teachers set up experiments or cleaning equipment. He was the type who'd give you his lunch money if you said you were hungry. The teachers loved him, but that same gentle nature made him an easy target. The bully was this massive kid who looked like he'd never met a meal he didn't like. He ruled the school through fear, surrounded by his gang of equally unpleasant followers. They weren't the brightest bunch, but they made up for it with cruelty. One day, I noticed the quiet kid had a swollen eye and was soaking wet. He was limping too and his backpack was torn. I asked him what happened, but he tried to brush it off as nothing. When I pressed him about it, saying it didn't look like nothing, he finally admitted the truth. He explained that he'd taken apart the bully's pen, just a cheap ballpoint pen. In retaliation, the bully had dragged him into the bathroom by his backpack. He hit his knee on the toilet, and then the bully shoved his face in. Things got worse over the next few weeks. The quiet kid started missing school after an incident where the bully stripped him down to his underwear and forced him to stuff his clothes in toilet bowls. The school administration, in their infinite wisdom, tried to expel the quiet kid for damaging school property. Thankfully, someone had recorded the bully's gang leaving the bathroom with his backpack and throwing it in the trash. When the quiet kid returned, he was different. The light in his eyes was gone. He stopped talking, stopped eating properly, and bruises appeared on him between classes like magic. Nobody did anything except this one athlete who caught the bully stealing the quiet kid's backpack. The athlete stuffed the bully in a trash can, got suspended for it, but did it again as soon as he came back. The school eventually gave up on suspending him after his parents threatened legal action. That small act of kindness seemed to breathe life back into the quiet kid. He started eating again, talking more. Then one day, he wore this beautiful hand-knitted scarf to school. I overheard him telling another student that his grandfather had made it for him before passing away. It was one of the few things he had left to remember him by. The bully took it. The next day, he handed the quiet kid a bag of ashes, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. The quiet kid came back the next day with his backpack full of sugar-free gummy bears. As expected, the bully stole them all and ate them throughout the day. The quiet kid cried, but something about those tears seemed off. Near the end of the day, the bully suddenly ran out of class clutching his stomach. He didn't come back for days. When he finally returned, he was wearing an eye patch and his face was covered in burst blood vessels. Turns out he'd had such violent diarrhea from the sugar-free gummy bears that he burst blood vessels in his face and eye from straining. The pressure was so intense it permanently damaged his left eye. Though sugar-free gummy bears are notorious for causing extreme digestive distress, and the quiet kid had calculated exactly how many it would take to cause maximum damage. The bully never bothered anyone again after that. He became withdrawn and quiet himself, missing lots of school for medical appointments. The quiet kid graduated with honors and got a full scholarship to study chemical engineering. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.